Okay, let's really shift our perspective on the end of the Trojan War for this deep dive. Forget the victorious Greek heroes sailing home for a minute. Instead, imagine standing right there in the absolute ruins of Troy. Not with a conqueror's feeling, but just crushed by loss.
That's exactly the vantage point we're taking.
Yeah.
We've been looking closely at this article, Troy's Lament, Women in War's Aftermath. Specifically, the part about the city's fall and, well, the women's reaction to it all.
Right. And our mission here is to unpack this source because it's quite something. It takes this huge epic event and zooms right down to the human level. You feel the grief, the rage, the despair of the women left behind. It's really quite gut-wrenching.
It really does flip the script on the usual war story.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating, like you said, is that it doesn't only stay human. It actually kicks off with a divine perspective, showing how even the gods are sort of caught up in this massive destruction.
Yeah, let's start there, actually, because the article does. It paints this picture of two major gods looking down on the devastation.
Right, Poseidon and Athena. The text shows them surveying the scene. And Poseidon, he helped build the city walls.
He actually feels grief for it.
Exactly. Grief for the city he once helped create.
But Athena's reaction is where it gets, well, really interesting. She was on the Greek side. You'd think she'd be celebrating.
But she's not. Her anger has completely turned.
Towards the Greeks.
Towards the Greeks themselves, yeah. Because they desecrated her temple during the sack of the city. And, crucially, they dragged Cassandra away from the altar right inside that sacred space. That was unforgivable to her.
Okay. So her victory celebration basically sours immediately into rage at her own side. And she decides, what? They need to be punished.
Pretty much. She goes to Poseidon and basically asks him to make their journey home a nightmare. Use his power against their ships. And he agrees. So right away, you get this foreshadowing of the terrible voyages and cursed homecomings waiting for the victors.
So what the article is suggesting here with this opening scene, it tells us something important about the gods in this story.
Yeah, it shows they aren't just, distant, impartial forces. They're portrayed as really proud, emotional beings. Their actions are driven by things like personal slights, a desire for revenge. Their help can absolutely turn to wrath. It's almost like a divine version of that hubris the Greeks themselves often display.
Okay, so even the gods have their own complex, messy motivations. But the real heart of this lament, as the article makes clear, it belongs to the human survivors, especially Queen Hecuba.
Hecuba is just. She's the embodiment of Troy's fall. The text gives this incredibly vivid, tragic picture of her. Once this powerful queen, the matriarch, now she's just kneeling in the dust, surrounded by ruins, mourning her husband Priam, all her sons, gone.
There's that quote in the article that just hits so hard, captures the totality of it.
We are no longer queens, princesses, or free mothers. We are prisoners.
Just devastating. And the article uses Hecuba and that line as more than just her personal tragedy, right? It's symbolic.
Oh, absolutely. It's presented as this powerful metaphor for the collapse of a whole civilization. And maybe even more importantly, the brutal way war just shreds identity, especially for women. Their lament isn't just for the dead. It's for who they used to be. Their status, freedom, their selves, all gone. Reduced to trophies, slaves.
And this new reality, this horrific future, it's spelled out very clearly when the Greek herald arrives.
Yes, Elthabius. He comes to announce their fates, and it's just brutal. The article lists them. Cassandra, the prophetess no one believed.
She's given to Agamemnon as a concubine.
Exactly, after being dragged from Athena's temple. Then there's Andromache, Hector's widow.
Oh, what happens to her?
She's given to Neoptolemus, Achilles' son.
Achilles' son, the son of the man who killed her husband. That's just cruel.
It is. And Queen Hecuba herself, she's assigned to Odysseus, the man she despises perhaps more than any other Greek, the architect of the Trojan horse.
The article also mentions Polyxena, Hecuba's daughter.
It does. Her horrific sacrifice at Achilles' tomb. The article points to this as a sign of the Greeks descending into barbarism, human sacrifice.
It's just layer upon layer of cruelty. And then, probably the most chilling part from the source, the fate of Astyanax, Hector's little boy.
His death is presented as just, cold and calculated. He's thrown from the city walls. And the reason given isn't anything he did, obviously. It's pure politics. To stop him from ever growing up and seeking revenge for Troy.
It's described as, what was the phrase? Generational erasure.
Yes, exactly. Murdering the last heir, not for who he is, but for who he might become one day. Wiping out the future.
And extinguishing any hope. It's horrifying. If we go back to Cassandra for a second, the article looks at her state right after the fall, too.
Yeah, she's depicted in this, almost frenzied They do dancing, but it's this wild mix of agony and, well, the text calls it a disturbing ecstasy. And even then, even amidst the ruins, she's still prophesying.
But now her prophecies are aimed at the Greeks, the victors.
Precisely. She foretells Agamemnon being murdered by his own wife, Clytemnestra, when he gets home. And she predicts Odysseus's long, tortured journey back. Years of suffering, monsters, storms, the whole ordeal.
And the article sees her madness here not just as, well, madness.
No, it frames it as a kind of symbol. She's the truth teller nobody listens to. That was always her curse. So here in this state, she becomes almost like the voice of cosmic justice, declaring that the Greeks' victory is hollow, that payback is coming.
Wow. So amidst all this Trojan suffering, the article also describes this really tense moment involving Helen, the face that launched 1,000 ships.
Right. Menelaus shows up to take her back. And you can just imagine the fury radiating from the Trojan women who've survived, seeing her.
The one they blame for everything. How does she react? How does she defend herself?
Well, the text says she basically blames the gods, specifically Aphrodite. Says she was made to fall for Paris, that it wasn't her choice, it was, fate or divine meddling.
And Hecuba's response to that?
Oh, Hecuba, having lost absolutely everything. She just explodes. She calls Helen out, basically says it's cowardly, refusing to take any responsibility. Blaming Aphrodite is just a pathetic excuse.
So what does Menelaus do? Does he kill her then and there?
No. Despite the clear rage from the Trojan women, he decides against it. He says he'll take her back to Greece for a proper trial.
And this whole interaction the article suggests really highlights a central theme.
It really does. That tension between fate and free will. Helen leans hard on fate, divine intervention. Hecuba demands moral accountability, saying choices matter.
Even amidst divine plans of prophecies, human choices still have consequences.
Exactly. Now, circling back to the immediate tragedy, that scene with Astyanax's body after he's killed, the article describes it so vividly.
It's just heartbreaking, isn't it? Hecuba and Andromache together with his body.
It is. And then Hecuba does something incredibly moving.
She uses Hector's shield.
Yes. She lays Astyanax's small body on his father's great shield. And the article includes her words, something like, "May this serve as your final bed, so that you may rest under the protection of your father's shield."
That imagery. The article calls it something specific, doesn't it?
A shield of war becoming a cradle of death. It's such a powerful visual metaphor. This object meant for battle, for protection, now serving as a bier for an innocent child killed as a strategic move.
It sums up the perversion of it all, and then the end finally comes for the city itself.
Yes, Troy is set ablaze. The flames just consume everything left, and while it burns, the women, the survivors, are herded onto the Greek ships. Their lives as slaves are about to begin.
And the article closes that section with Hecuba's final words as she's being led away.
Yes, it's like an epitaph, but also a plea. She says, "May future generations learn of our story and heed the lessons of our tragedy."
And the article sees that not just as mourning, but as something more proactive.
Definitely. It's presented as a direct plea for historical memory. A demand, almost, that the story of the losers, the cost paid by the defeated, isn't just swept aside by the victor's tales.
Okay, so let's try and pull together the big takeaways from this source. What are the core themes it's really highlighting about Troy's aftermath?
Well, there are a few key ones the article really emphasizes. First, obviously, is the focus on women in war. It shifts the whole perspective away from the male heroes to those who are arguably most profoundly affected, stripped of agency, status, everything. Yet they become the keepers of the city's memory through their lament.
It's a vital counter-narrative, isn't it?
Absolutely essential. Second, there's that idea of divine irony. The gods aren't presented as purely moral or just figures here. They're shown as impulsive, vengeful, mirroring human flaws sometimes, and their actions directly contribute to the layers of tragedy.
Right. And the third main theme connects back to Hecuba's final words, the story itself.
Exactly. Legacy and storytelling. The article argues that the true cost of war isn't measured in glory or territory, but in these shattered lives. And it stresses how crucial it is to hear and remember the story from the perspective of the defeated, the ones who paid that price.
Okay, so let's bring this back to you, listening now. This deep dive into Troy's Lament, it's shown us a different kind of epic, hasn't it? By really looking at the end of the Trojan War through the eyes of these women, we uncover the story of just profound loss, but also maybe a kind of resilience in their sorrow, in their determination to remember.
Yeah, it forces us to look past the usual heroic stuff and confront the sheer human devastation underneath it all.
So why does understanding this perspective thousands of years later still matter? How does focusing on that human cost, the loss of identity, this plea for memory from the losing side, how does that resonate today?
Well, I think it challenges us. It makes us ask whose stories get told after conflicts and maybe what important truths we lose if we only ever listen to the winners.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to maybe sit with, inspired by Hecuba's words from the article. May future generations learn of our story and heed the lessons of our tragedy. Unquote. What lessons should we, these future generations, actually take from the tragedy of Troy's women? And perhaps more pointedly, what stories from the defeated, the marginalized, the silenced in our own times throughout history are we maybe failing to hear, failing to heed right now?
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.